Antichrist is tied to Mystery Babylon, but God is going to use the Antichrist to judge Mystery Babylon. Revelation 17 and 18. So there's a woman who rides a beast. That's what John sees. And this beast has 7 heads and 10 horns. This woman sits on many waters. But the beast and the 10 horns will hate the harlot and will burn her with fire. And it says that Mystery Babylon is the city that reigns over the kings of the earth. And so the angel explains the vision. He says the 10 horns are 10 kings without a kingdom, but they will gain power with the beast for 1 hour. And then they give all their authority to the beast. Now, the 10 horns are part of the beast. So what does it mean that the 10 horns give their power to the beast? It almost treats the horns as separate. And the answer is that the beast speaks of 2 things. The beast is both the kingdom of Antichrist, and the beast is also Antichrist. In fact, it says there's 7 heads are 7 hills or 7 mountains, and they are 7 kings. And the beast is the 7th. He's one of the 7, but he also becomes an 8th. Now, what does that mean? 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. You can read that in 2 ways. There can be 7 literal mountains. Rome was the Babylon of the New Testament era. Rome, Peter regards Rome as Babylon. He says, "She who is in Babylon greets you," speaking about the Roman believers, the Roman church. They're in Babylon. Babylon is the empire of Rome. That was the Babylon of that day. Rome was built on 7 hills. What's also interesting is Jerusalem's on 7 hills as well. So you're going to see this correlation between Babylon and Jerusalem in the last days. Both are called the Great City. In Revelation, the 2 witnesses lie in the streets of the great city where their Lord was crucified. It's called the Great City. Babylon's called the Great City. Babylon's connected with witchcraft, occult, depravity. Jerusalem's connected with occult and depravity. Jerusalem's mystically called Sodom and Egypt. Do you see there's a correlation? Jerusalem will be burned with fire, according to Nahum, I think chapter 3. Babylon's going to be burned with fire. Jerusalem's 10th of the city is going to fall down. A 10th part of the city is going to fall down. Babylon itself is going to be thrown down like a millstone thrown into water. Jerusalem will suffer the same kind of judgments as Babylon will. There's a difference between the 2, that you can't say Jerusalem is Mystery Babylon. Because Jerusalem gets rebuilt, becomes the highest mountain, God restructures it. Jesus is going to rule from Jerusalem. Babylon, the city itself, will never be rebuilt. The kingdom, its territory, will continue, but under Christ, but the city itself will become a haunt of demons. Or haunt of animals. It will never be rebuilt. It will be desolate. So there is a difference, but Jerusalem is like Babylon. When Babylon is judged, the great city is judged. It's split into 3, and the cities of the nations fall. That means Babylon is not just a city, it's a system, a religious political system that infects other cities in the world, including Jerusalem. So you can see that it's big. Mystery Babylon is big. There are attributes of Babylon that make people think there are 2 Babylons. So because Babylon in Revelation chapter 17 is burnt with fire, but Babylon in chapter 18 is thrown down like a millstone thrown into water, therefore they say that's 2 different judgments, therefore there must be 2 different Babylons, and they'll say the Babylon in chapter 17 is religious, but the Babylon in chapter 18 is political. and they would believe they're judged at different times. When I read through Revelation 17 to 18, I don't see two Babylons. I see the judgment in Revelation 18 continues on, speaking about the same entity. So for me, I find it difficult to separate the two. Just because she's burned with fire in chapter 17, but she's thrown down in chapter 18, doesn't mean you're dealing with two different entities. The same entity could be burned with fire and be cast down. But I won't be dogmatic on it, So maybe there are two Babylons. Maybe there's just the one. But it experiences series of judgments. It experiences series of judgments, burned with fire and cast down. But let's look at some of the attributes of Mystery Babylon. Okay, so firstly, in chapter 17, verse 1, it says this: Then one of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and spoke with me, saying, Come here, and I will show you the judgment of the great harlot who sits on many waters. The first thing in verse 17, verse 1, is she's a great, and I'm going to put this in black, she's a great harlot. She's very much connected with harlotry, prostitution. Also, she sits on many waters. You see that there. Now, if you look at verse 15, it tells us what the waters are. The waters which you saw where the harlot sits are peoples and multitudes and nations and languages. So in verse 17, verse 1 and verse 15, you see she's global. So she is a city, but she's also global. She sits on many waters. In fact, I should have put that in black. I'll just underline it. The next part we see in chapter 8, verse 18, verse 3. All the nations have drunk of the wine of the passion of her immorality, and the kings of the earth have committed acts of immorality with her, and the merchants of the earth have become rich by the wealth of her sensuality. The first thing, you see that in verse 2 to 4 of chapter 17 as well. She's immoral. So let me get the black pen. She's immoral. That's the third point. She's immoral. Next, she sits on the beast. She rides a beast. She's clothed in scarlet, and in verse 3, she's sitting on a scarlet beast. She's a rider of a beast.
She's also very wealthy.
What's that?
Also very, very wealthy.
Yeah, so we'll look at that. There's all the different designations. She's a rider of a beast. Next, she's luxurious, which fits into wealth, luxury. I'm not sure how to spell this. Luxurious.
L-U-X.
Yeah.
U-R.
She's luxurious. Okay. All the wealth, trading in slaves, lives of men, gold, silver, scarlet, all kinds of wealth. She makes the nations rich by her merchandise. You can see why the nations love her, because she makes them wealthy. Next, she has a name. And the name is in verse 5. So her name is Mystery. Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots. And the mother, it implies the word mother there, the mother of the abominations of the earth. Abominations of earth. So she's the mother of harlots and the mother of the abominations of the earth. That means she is the source. She is the source of harlotry, and she's the source of the abominations of the earth. She's the mother of everything that earth dwellers do in defiance of God. Number 8, she's a ruler. Chapter 17, verse 18. She reigns over the kings of the earth. She's a ruler. She sits as queen. She sits as queen. So we can put the word queen here. She's not made queen. She makes herself queen. Number 9, 18 verse 2. She's demonic. She is demonic. 18 verse 2 says, Fallen, fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a dwelling place of demons, and a prison of every unclean spirit, and a prison of every unclean and hateful bird. She's demonic. Next, in verse 7, she's proud. It says, to the degree that she glorified herself and lived sensuously, to the same degree give her torment and mourning, for she says in her heart, I sit as queen, and I am not a widow, and will never see mourning. So let's look at these attributes. She's proud. She's sensuous. She makes people feel good. She makes people feel good. So everything to do with drunkenness, to do with debauchery, to do with, it's all feel-good religion. That is why we should never get involved with the seeker-friendly movement. That doesn't mean that we mustn't acknowledge where people are at and know where people's real needs are and meet them to show the love of Christ to them. But what it does mean is we don't seek to give people what they want in order to entice them to come into our church. Because that's feel-good religion. That's about making people feel good in worship. That's sensuality. That should not, if you feel good, that's a byproduct. It's not what we're after to do. It's not what we're after. This is what she's after. Because she can promote sensuality and making people feel great and good, then she promotes her agenda. See, she's sensuous. She's also proud, and she is defiant. I sit as queen. I will never know the loss of children. And there's one more. She's a murderer. She's drunk with the blood of the saints. I put I, defiant. I sit as queen. I will never know. It sounds like Satan. I will ascend to the Most High. Satan's at the heart of Mystery Babylon. So these are the characteristics of Mystery Babylon. But notice she's called the mother of harlots and the mother of the abominations of the earth. And that teaches us that she's the source. Yeah, okay. So let's go back to the source. The source is Genesis 10, verses 8 to 12. So let's turn to Genesis chapter 10, verses 8 to 12. Okay. Number 1 is Babel. This is the origin. Babel and Nimrod. So it says here, now Cush became the father of Nimrod, and he became a mighty one on the earth. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel and Erech and Akkad and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land he went forth into Assyria and built Nineveh and Rehoboth, Ir and Calah and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah. That is the great city. Mizraim, okay, so there we stop. Nimrod is the first empire builder. Before this time, it's very possible you had kings, meaning chiefs, heads of families, who had that ruling position in their families or their tribes. It's possible you had that. What Nimrod does is he goes beyond that into empire building. He's the first empire builder. He's the first person who represents people, who lifts himself above other rulers. Okay? And he has two territories, Shinar, which is Iraq, and Assyria, which is Iran. In Shinar, Iraq, we start with Babel. In fact, let me write these down. So we've got Babel, number 1, B. We have Erech. We have Akkad. And we have Calneh. And then you go into Iran, and you've got, which is Assyria, and you've got Nineveh, number 1. I'm just going to put an R for Rehoboth, Ir. And then there is Calah, and there is Rezin. And Rezin, do you notice what it says here about Rezin? It's called the Great City. Anytime you have a city in the Bible called the Great City, you're seeing something about that relates to Babylon the Great. Babylon the Great is also the Great City. Nineveh in the book of Jonah is called the Great City. And God's saying to Nineveh, repent. They do repent, but their repentance is for a time, and God then brings judgment later. He postpones judgment on them. God is always going to judge the great city. But before he judges, he gives time to repent. And when he goes to judge, he says to God's people, come out of her, my people. Now let's look at Nimrod. Nimrod, a lot of people think it comes from the word marad. Marad, which means to rebel. To rebel. He's called a great or a mighty hunter. Think of the first seal in Revelation. The man on the white horse comes out with a bow. It's the instrument of a hunter. And he goes out conquering and to conquer, and that's what Nimrod did. It's empire building. So the first rider is Antichrist. Nimrod is one of, sorry, not the first, but one of the first types of Antichrist. Cain is the first. Cain is the first. Now there's a guy in the first century called Josephus. He was a Jewish historian. He lived at the time of the destruction of Jerusalem in AD 70. He wrote about it in the Wars of the Jews, but he also wrote another book called The Antiquities of the Jews. Now he says about Nimrod that Nimrod turned around to people and said, don't trust in God for your happiness, look to your own courage. So when it says he was a mighty hunter before the Lord, that word before, lifnei, means literally to the face of. It can mean before, it can also mean in opposition. In other words, he was a mighty hunter in defiance of the Lord. And that's how he was understood at the time of Jesus, as defiant against God. He said that Nimrod, Josephus said that Nimrod, he taught people to trust in themselves for their happiness, and he said to them, well, basically what he did is he gradually turned his kingdom into tyranny. So he's always a bad guy, but he starts out looking like a good guy, and slowly he becomes oppressive. You can't have an empire without oppression. For all the good things that came out of the British Empire in terms of missionaries, in terms of education, even today in Zimbabwe, they still go with Cambridge today. There were good things that came out of the British Empire, but there's no way they extended their territory without oppression. Look at the Anglo-Boer War, look at the Irish, look at the Indians, look at the Africans. There was oppression. Anytime you have an empire building, you have oppression. And so he turned his kingdom into oppression and tyranny, gradually. Also, the people couldn't stop trusting in God for happiness. There was something inside of them. They knew they're not God. They knew that they had to look to someone higher. So then he started turning people to look to him. So he becomes a God-like figure. He becomes a God. Does that remind you of Antichrist? But very interesting. The other thing he does is he says, I'm going to avenge myself on God. I'm going to build a tower. And if God ever dares to flood the earth again, I will go up that tower and I will avenge myself on him. And so he builds a tower to elevate himself to God's level, and in order to defy God for sending the flood. Now let's go to another area called Sumeria. There's a series of tablets called the Sumerian tablets. They have a mythology, and in some places their myths do somewhat resemble certain things in the Bible, but different. Now, in the Sumerian mythologies, there was a myth called the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Gilgamesh is a character. They believed he was 2 parts God, 1 part man. So he is divine human. Antichrist can be presented as divine human. He was a vile man. He just basically was a person who, like, if he saw a woman, doesn't matter whether she's married or single, he just takes her. And no one could stand up to him. He's so strong. And so along comes another character called Enkidu, who is part animal, part human. And they have they make friends, but his strength matches his strength. And it almost is presented that they have a homosexual relationship with each other. It seems like that. Now, what's interesting about Gilgamesh is firstly, he's presented as a shepherd, a ruler king. He's presented as a mighty hunter. That's how he's depicted. He's a mighty hunter. He takes Enkidu with him to go to kill Wawa, the god who sent the flood. Who do you think he's based on?
Yeah, Nimrod.
The mighty hunter, the shepherd king, the one who defies the god who sent the flood. Nimrod. What's very interesting is in the Sumerian list of kings, there's a king called Nimrod, son of Kish. Nimrod, son of Cush. Nimrod, son of Kish. And they believe that kingship descended from heaven and landed on Kish. In other words, Nimrod is born to the one who gained the right of kingship from heaven. Divine right of kings started with Nimrod. They say, and this is what I think it's Josephus who says this, Nimrod was the first king to take a crown on his head. Or it might be Nimrod, I think it was Nimrod. He was the first king to put a crown on his head. He elevated himself above every other ruler. He distinguished himself. Josephus said, it was in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh says, whether I live or die, I will make a name for myself. So that's Babel, that's Nimrod. That's the character of Nimrod. Now let's go to Nineveh. Number 2, Nineveh. Nineveh, there was a mythology based around a goddess queen called Semiramis. Semiramis, they believed, There's actually many different Semiramises. Semiramis probably was based on several figures. The Hanging Gardens of Babylon were based on Semiramis II, were dedicated in honor of her. Okay, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Semiramis, it was told that she was born from a fish goddess who abandoned her, and then she was looked after a royal shepherd called Simus. But before that shepherd found her, she was looked after by doves. So doves are connected to Semiramis. She married a man called Ninus, and Ninus and her had a son called Ninnius. Ninus is said to be the one who founded Nineveh. He's the one who founded Nineveh. But who was it who built Nineveh? Who founded it? Nimrod. Ninus is possibly based on Nimrod. And if Ninus is based on Nimrod, then Semiramis is possibly based on Nimrod's wife. And that's why some people call Nimrod's wife Semiramis. It wasn't actually her name, it was the name of this goddess who's probably based on Nimrod's wife. So it's a term of convenience to call her Semiramis, but that wasn't her name. We don't know what her name was. But when Ninus was supposed to be the son of Bel. And Bel is the same name as Baal. He's the son of Baal. Now, Ninus, when he died in the mythology, Semiramis then reigned as queen regent. She took power. But people in the mythology accused her of causing her husband's death. So to clear her name of suspicion, she built a temple to Ninus so that people would worship him. So Ninus becomes a god. Ninus becomes a god, and he's worshipped. Nimrod worshipped as a god, even though he's man. Now, Semiramis is the base of what's called Ishtar worship. So the mythology around Ishtar grew from Semiramis. So let's move into the world. Let's move to, I'm going to clean this off just to give us space. Number 3, we go to Erech and Akkad, which are the second and third cities that Nimrod built. Erech and Akkad, and you have a character called Ishtar. Ishtar, they believed, fell from heaven in an egg and landed in the Euphrates River. So the Easter egg is actually from Ishtar. The Easter egg is from Ishtar. The name Easter, some people dispute this. Some people say it comes from a German word. But Easter comes from Ishtar. So does the name, Esther. So does the name Esther. Esther is based on Ishtar. So when Esther, Hadassah, became Esther, she was named after Ishtar. Why do I make that point? Because just because something has the name named after a pagan god doesn't make that person pagan. Mm-hmm. The days of our week: Sunday, the day of the sun; Monday, the day of the moon; Wednesday, Odin's day; Thursday, Thor's day; Friday, Frigg's day. Frigg was the wife of Odin. Saturday, Saturn's day. Days of worshipping these different gods, or to connect to these different gods, doesn't mean we are pagan for calling the days of the week by their pagan names. Just to emphasize that. Scripture puts this, because we live in the world. I'm not going to call someone who eats an Easter egg a pagan, but it's important to know where it comes from. I'm not going to call someone who has a birthday cake with candles a pagan, and we'll look at that in a minute. But Ishtar landed with an egg in the Euphrates River. She was, let's look at this, I've got it written down here. She was a fertility goddess, but she was the goddess of fertility, of war, of love, and of sex. Okay? She had many lovers, so she was a harlot of the gods. She was a harlot of the gods. They call her consort of gods. Small g. She had a lover called Tammuz, who was actually her son. So she gives birth to a son, that son grows up, and that son becomes her lover. Tammuz is killed and he dies, so she goes into the underworld and raises him from the dead, resurrection. So she's connected to resurrection. She is called the Queen of Heaven. Queen of Heaven. I'm not going to be able to write all this down because I've got quite a number of things. She's called the Queen of Heaven. And the idea is she reigns without a male deity, like somewhere else. I don't need a man, I will be queen. Defiant. She is always, even though she's a prostitute, they always regarded her as a virgin. She's the eternal virgin. Eternal virgin. Her symbol was an 8-pointed star, and that was tied to the planet Venus. And Venus is the bright and morning star and the star of the evening. She's connected to lions, which are beasts. She's connected to lions. She had the lions portrayed on her gates. And her worship included cult prostitution. Prostitutes, because she's the prostitute of the gods. So the idea is when people went with her prostitutes, there was some fertility rite going on in order to guarantee fertility. That was the concept. It's almost like going with the prostitute was the same as going with the god, the goddess, Ishtar. So it's Ishtar worship. This then spreads. So then you go into another area, which is in Sumer, southern Iraq. And in southern Iraq, which is Babylon, part of Babylon, she's called Inanna. Inanna is the same as Ishtar, but kind of developed. But Inanna means the Queen of Heaven. The Queen of Heaven.
Which religion is this now?
This is Babylonian religion. So it starts in Babel with Nimrod,
But
goes
who
to
believes
Nineveh,
this
Semiramis.
now today? Sorry.
So, yeah, sorry?
Who believes this now today?
We're going to trace it to today.
Oh, okay.
We're going to trace it
sorry.
to today. It's a mystery that is the mother of harlots, but it just keeps going through. So you have, she's the Queen of Heaven. She's considered the goddess of love and war, but she's not associated with fertility, so she becomes distinct. Now get this. Her partner was Dumuzi, which is the same as Tammuz, but not the son of Inanna, but same kind of thing, and she brings him back from the dead. Now, Inanna's symbol was the same. She had the same symbols. She included cult prostitution, but it goes beyond that. Now it goes into male prostitutes. They were effeminate men who were hermaphrodites or asexual. They are involved. So can you see how it gets more and more depraved? This is what we're seeing in our day. It's getting more and more depraved. So we either go more and more godly, or we go more and more depraved. So fast forward to Egypt. Egypt, you had a goddess called Isis. Isis possibly didn't come from this source, but inspired by the same spirits. So Isis is the wife of Osiris, and Cyrus is attacked by Seth and killed. She goes and raises him up from the dead. Again, resurrection. Where is this? Where is it? Here. She rides the beast who raises from the dead. There's a connection here between the two. She was called the Queen of Heaven and the Queen of the Gods. The Queen of the Gods. She is also the goddess of motherhood, magic, and fertility. And she was regarded as the friend of sinners. Sinners, slaves, nobility, all kinds of people just felt so comfortable to share their praise with Mother God, Mother Queen of Heaven, the lady. They gravitate to her because she's so understanding. It kind of reminds me of something else. But when Isis worship spread to other parts of the world, the other parts of the world where they were worshipping goddesses based on Ishtar, that were developed from Ishtar, they said, Isis is the same as our goddess. The same spiritual source. Let's move on. Canaan and Lebanon. So, Canaan and Lebanon. You had two names, but they're really the same. Astarte and Ashtaroth. You'll read about Ashtaroth in the Old Testament. Ashtaroth and Baal, they go together. Ashtaroth and Astarte come from Ishtar. Ishtar, Astarte, Ishtar, Ashtaroth is the same goddess. She was seen as the wife or the consort or the prostitute of El and the prostitute of Baal. Now, Baal and El belong to the same pantheon of Canaan gods. El was the chief god of the Canaanite gods. Baal was the god of thunder and lightning. Baal in one time usurped El in terms of popularity. When Israel came in the land, the northern tribes, when they separated from the southern tribes, confused Elohim, El Shaddai, El Gibor, El, with this El. And the Judah, they confused their Baal, their Lord, their husband, with this Baal. So they said, Astarte, Ashtaroth, is the consort of El, our God who brought us up from Egypt. And in Judah, they said, she's the wife of our Baal, Jehovah. You see what happens with these religions? It mixes with gods because the words are very similar. Because they use the same words, they mix two different religions together. This is exactly what's happening in ecumenism today. Let's join with the Catholic Church and what's happening in multi-faith. You believe in Allah, we believe in God, but it's the same God. Allah just means God. Okay, let's worship together. That is the same kind of phenomenon. Now look at this. She's the goddess of sex and war. Just like Ishtar, she was worshipped by prostitutes. And the prostitutes were called Kadoshim, Kadoshot, holy ones. They were called holy. It was regarded holy acts to go with these prostitutes. And these prostitutes were...
In the temple. Were those the temple prostitutes?
Which temple?
I don't know, because you read about the temple prostitutes.
Yeah, but these are pagan temples.
Okay.
Now, Israel went and got infected by this evil religion. But all these places, Beit Shemesh, House of the Sun, Temple of the Sun, Beit this, Beit that in Israel, many of them were originally pagan shrines. That's Beit is connected not just to your house, but to the house of the God. So their symbols were symbols of the lion, horses, the sphinx, dove, star within a circle representing Venus. So she calls herself the bright and morning star. That's why God says to Babylon, you bright and morning star, how far you've fallen. It's to do with Ishtar worship. Then, another name that was given to her was Anat. But in the 13th century, the Egyptians regarded Anat and Astarte as two gods, two goddesses. So they were regarded as distinct, but basically they're the same thing. They were considered the great goddesses who conceive but do not bear. So the idea that they're trying to say is she's always having sexual relations and she's always fruitful, but she retains her virginity, so she's the eternal virgin. She's known, all of these are known as the mother of all peoples, the mother of gods, the Holy One, the Holy Mother, and she was worshipped through sacred prostitution just like the others. Now, Anat, when she went to rescue Baal, she was considered the wife of Baal, and he died by Mot, whose Mut, died, death. She goes down with this cruel streak, and she goes and she fights and brings him back from the dead. But they said above her head fly human hands like locusts, and beneath her feet are human heads, and she clothes herself with dismembered human body parts. That is very similar to Kali of Hindu mythology. This spirit of Babylon just infects all these different nations. Then you go to Greece. Aphrodite, goddess of love, worshipped by temple prostitutes, regarded as the goddess of love, sexuality, and beauty, identified with the evening star. That's why the Romans called her Venus. The Romans called her Venus. She came from Ishtar and Inanna. Then you have another goddess called Demeter. Demeter comes from the word Damate, which means mother goddess, Damate. And she was also known as Mother Earth. Mother Earth. Goddess of fertility, agriculture, harvest, festivals, earths and seasons, and presided over the sanctity of marriage, so she's connected to sexuality. Now, she was worshipped as part of the Eleusinian mysteries. And so this is what happens, and this is why I'm bringing this in. In the Eleusinian mysteries, you came in and you went through ritual and you were initiated into a secret knowledge that no one else had. You had to speak Greek, you had to have not murdered anyone and identify with Greek culture, then you could come in. When you come in, you sworn to secrecy. And if you keep the secrets, you believe that you're going to get rewarded in the afterlife. And then you go through different levels of secret knowledge, and the whole idea is to be liberated from this physical body, because the physical is evil, and to release the spirit to go back to its source. And the ultimate end of that is to realize we are one with the universe. We are God. That is, we looked at this with Antichrist and Gnostic thought, secret knowledge. The Antichrist is going to be saying, you can go back to God. I am the living proof of that. I am God. And he will claim to have power of death because he's resurrected from the dead. But in Demeter, come from Damate, mother goddess, known as Mother Earth, she, in the mythology, her daughter Persephone goes and gets dragged into the underworld. She goes to rescue her and brings her back from the dead. It's this thing that keeps coming up again and again and again. They would use drugs to worship, they would have orgies, they would do all kinds of stuff. All this stuff just continues. Then you have in Greece another goddess called Irene. Irene is classed as peace. Irene means peace. And she is the mother with child. And the child is Demeter's child, Plutos, which means plenty. And the idea is plenty prospers under the protection of peace. But she's the mother with child. You have quite a few of those goddesses around the world. Mother with child. Then you're also in Rome. Let's swing to Rome. You have a goddess called Ceres. Ceres, which is a goddess of agriculture
Oh, for
and
goodness
fertility.
sake. I don't want to hear
The Greek Jew Ceres is named after the place in the Cape called Ceres.
Oh,
And that place is named after this goddess.
It's
It's an agricultural place. That's why they gave it the name. Now, this was seen as a Roman counterpart to Demeter. And it was known, and she was one with Tellus, and originally people think she came from, her and this god Tellus, which is the earth, were originally one god. So basically she's Mother Earth. She's Mother Earth. They believed that when they did rites, Ceres would go into the underworld and bring, 3 times a year, bring the spirits of the dead to go among the living. So she's connected with the dead and the underworld and bringing them back to the living. Even though it's not resurrection, she's connected to that idea. Now, let's go to Turkey.
those are those poor.
Phrygia. Phrygia had a goddess called Sibyl. Sibyl was originally, not at the New Testament time, but in its origin, from the same source as Artemis or Diana. And Artemis, Diana was the goddess of the moon. It was worshipped in Ephesus. And so when Paul preached there, he was turning people away from worshipping Diana or Artemis. And so they had this big riot. Great is Artemis of the Ephesians. That's the same goddess. Sibyl was from that same source. Artemis was worshipped they would light candles on cakes, on moon-shaped round cakes, in honor of her. And when they blew those candles out, their prayers went up to Artemis. So blow the candles and make a wish actually comes from
From
this. But the whole thing of birthdays comes from paganism. I mean,
That's right.
early church Christians said we don't celebrate, only pagans celebrate their birthdays. But I'm not saying that to condemn birthdays. What I'm saying is this, that there's so many things based on paganism. And I'm not going to call someone a pagan because they keep to remember their birthday. But it's important to know where things come from, nevertheless. And it's important to recognize this so that we don't get all high and mighty at Christmas and Easter with other Christians. We can educate and say, but everyone bears their own before the Lord. Everyone. But if you get so high and mighty on Christmas and Easter, you're going to get high and mighty on birthdays as well. And then
On everything.
on everything. But I don't do Christmas or Easter.
Even on serious Jews.
Serious cheese. Yeah. But look at this. Sibyl was thought of as Mother Earth, Earth Goddess, Mother of the Gods. She was regarded as being pulled in a chariot by lions. Back to Ishtar. And she rose her son Attis from the dead. And she's worshipped by males who castrated themselves and took on identities as girls and were involved in orgies. The same worship. Then we go, and I'm just going to say these quickly. Nerthus in Germany was Mother Earth. Nerthus, Nerthus, Mother Earth. She was pulled in a chariot, her shrine, pulled in a chariot by heifers. Didn't have any lions in Germany, obviously. And they believed that she would bring peace on earth. So when they took her shrine in this chariot, it would bring peace between the tribes. So the Mother Earth, the Mother God, brings peace between peoples. That concept is important to remember for where we are today. In South America, Pachamama in the Andes, she was regarded as Mother Earth. And she was a fertility goddess. China. This is really interesting. Let's go to China here. Xingmu. Sounds like a cow goddess, but it's not. Xingmu. Xingmu or Xingmu. Xingmu. Okay, Xingmu was a nature goddess in China. She was seen to be the mother of perfect intelligence. Chinese are big on intelligence and philosophy. She was China's holy virgin. They believed she miraculously miraculously conceived her firstborn by virgin birth. Okay? And the Son was to be the Savior of the world. Sounds very much like the Bible. He was also seen as the Spirit of the grain. The Son came like a lamb with no bursting, rending, hurt, and harm, and was adored by sheep and oxen. Sounds very similar, but get this. But because she is regarded as the great mother, they believe that afterwards she gave birth to 33,333 other children. But because she was regarded as a virgin separated from sex, therefore they said she gave birth out of her arm or out of her breast. That's what they claimed about her. But even though she's not connected to sexuality, she was regarded as the patron goddess of prostitutes. She's connected to harlotry. She's the mother of harlots, but a imposter for Mary and Jesus.
Yes.
Counterfeit. Now let's look at this. So today, if you go to Portugal, there's a place called Fatima.
Yes. Lady of Fatima.
By the way, Xingmu was called Mother Goddess and the Queen of Heaven. And the Queen of Heaven, just like all these other goddesses. Now, in Portugal, you've got Fatima. In Poland, you've got Medjugorje. In Egypt, you've got Zaytun. Where we lived in Praia, it's up the road, there's a place called Ngome, and in Ngome, there's a place, it's called the Marian Shrine. The belief is that certain Catholics at certain times experienced visions of Mary, and Mary spoke to them. And when the Vatican get involved and they say that was a genuine experience, they make a shrine to Mary in that place. And therefore, people make pilgrimage so that Mary will hear their prayers, especially a lot of poor people. In Portugal, I never grew up in Portugal, I was born there, but my parents say that old ladies will go on their knees on pilgrimage, crawling on their knees will become bloodied and red, but they suffer so that when they get to the shrine, Mary will hear their prayers. Now this Mary who appears, this Mary, tells people things that are in the Bible. She says, read your Bible. She tells people to worship Jesus, honor Jesus. But then she also says, build shrines to me in every place. And she says, my sacred heart, her and Jesus apparently have the same sacred heart, my sacred heart will prevail. And I will bring peace on the earth when I am crowned queen. She's actually called by Catholics the Queen of Heaven. She's an imposter. She's not the Mary of the Bible.
No.
Because the Mary of the Bible never says, come to me. Only says, listen to him.
That's right.
But this Mary says, no, listen to him, go to him, but go to me as well. Pray. They pray the rosary. When they pray the rosary, Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with you. Blessed are you. Who are they praying to? Blessed are you, Mary. They're praying that Mary will intercede for them with Jesus. The Bible says, 1 Timothy 2 verse 5, there is one God and one mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. They say, yes, Jesus is the mediator to God, but Mary is the mediator to Jesus. You see how clever they are? You ask people to pray for you, don't you? Well, so what's wrong with asking Mary to pray for you? But Mary died. No, but she didn't. She was assumed into heaven and bodily alive. You see the cleverness of their arguments. But we go direct to Jesus. I don't need a mediator. There is no mediator. There's only one mediator. Jesus. But the idea is Jesus gets angry with you and he might not listen to your prayers, but he'll listen to his mother. Well, they're Italian. From an Italian background. You listen to your mother. I mean, it's a matriarchal society. But it's the same as ISIS. Friend of sinners. Go to your mother Mary. Go to the mother Goddess. She'll hear your prayers. She'll put in a good word for you. Mary, the Marian apparitions are the same spirit. Mother harlot. Mother of abominations of the earth. The Queen of Heaven. What she's called the Queen of Heaven, but she makes herself Queen of Heaven. Mary makes herself Queen of Heaven, Not Mary of the Bible, but the Mary of the Catholic Church.
Yes.
Mary. Not Miriam of
Not
Scripture,
Miriam.
but the Mary of the Roman Catholic Church. The mother with child. Ooh, sounds like yeah, sounds like Irene. Okay, let's look at something even more contemporaneous. The music industry.
Oi, it's distressing.
The music industry. The pop industry. Now, when I say the music industry, I'm not saying everybody in the music industry. I'm not saying anybody who does pop or rock or heavy metal is part of this. What I'm saying is that in the music industry, one of the biggest names is Madonna. Madonna, her name is from Mary. That's what she's called, Madonna, Our Lady. They call her Our Lady of Heaven. Madonna, what happened in the 70s, and I'm not around, but I'm working off what other people say. I wasn't around in the 70s, I was just born then. But in the 70s, people were looking for spiritual reality. They were looking to become one with the cosmos. They used drugs. They were trying to find meaning to life. Because at home, it was the same old, go to university, go to get a good job so you can send your kids to university. And there was the Vietnam, there were the wars that were happening. People were disillusioned. They were trying to find meaning. But it didn't really work out. There was still thefts, there was still, in these communes, there was still like people taking each other for a ride, and we kind of moved away from that whole thing and into the 80s, forget spirituality, forget drugs, well, not forget drugs, but forget drugs as a way to get into spirituality. All that matters is what we have here. It was materialism. So it was about getting pleasure, getting most out you can out of life now, because that's all you've got. So Madonna comes along, I'm living in a material world and I'm a material girl. She was symbolizing the spirit of the age. Now we're beyond that. We realize you can't actually get rid of your spirituality. It's very much a part of us. So now spirituality is combined back into music, but then it was all plastic, synthesized music and image. But Madonna's gone beyond that, and she's gone into the goddess phase of music. And what that means is, her and those artists who are influenced with her are taking on goddess type personalities. So you had Britney Spears, who was like the goddess of war. Madonna went into Kabbalah, and Kabbalah is Jewish Gnostic mysticism. Jewish Gnosticism, mystery, religion. Britney Spears went mental. She went to apparently, if this source is correct, she went into a barber or a hairdresser, had her hair shaved off, and the hairdresser was called Estes. And she had a Star of David shaved into the back of her head. She went mental. She is replaced by Lady Gaga, who takes up the goddess of love type imagery. In the Grammys one year, she came into the Grammys and she said she spent 3 days, I don't know if it's true, but she claimed she spent 3 days in an egg. And then when she was carried in by men who looked like male cult prostitutes into the Grammys in an egg, and she came out. Ishtar.
No kidding me.
Kylie Minogue is, she brought out an album called Aphrodite. You have a rap artist called Lil' Kim. She says, I'm more than an artist, I'm a goddess. And you know the whole diva kind of thing? Like you're a diva, I'm a diva? Diva means goddess. It's this whole kind of imagery of goddess. And it's almost like they are human embodiments of these goddesses manifested in culture today. Now it starts way before. It starts with people like David Bowie, bands like Queen, Culture Club. What they did is they challenged the the idea of gender identity. So David Bowie comes on, and is he a woman? Is he a man? He has this androgynous look about him. Counterculture do that, but with the homosexual undertones. The band Queen were about promoting the homosexual agenda. We Are the Champions was the theme tune of the homosexual community, apparently. So what happens is these artists become popular. The people love the artists. This music culture is full of idolatry. The idols are the people, the musicians. And their pictures are put on the walls of kids' bedrooms almost as shrines. And so what happens is, homosexuality is not too bad. Cross-dressing is not too bad. Look at the artists. Now it's all under the surface. Then you come into the film world, and I forgot what year it was, but you had that landmark film called Brokeback Mountain. Two men who discover they love, one tries to attract the other into the homosexual world, and they have a relationship, and it romanticized the whole homosexual relationship. And I believe that was a watershed which then made it more acceptable, so that what was already under the surface and already happening then just becomes mainstream, to the point that today churches are ordaining homosexual leaders. Now, when I say homosexual, I don't mean same-sex attracted. I mean engaged in homosexual relationships and defending it and saying, no, it's right. The music culture set the tone. The film culture made it mainstream. The music culture is affecting kids to be involved in this kind of thinking, in this kind of mindset, in this kind of worldview. And the amazing thing, Lady Gaga, she was classified by her friends Mother Monster, and her followers were My Little Monsters. And they called her Our Lady of Gaga Lupe, and were buying prayer candles to Lady Gaga. Now it's all of kind of a making fun type thing, but it's playing on the same imagery, the goddess imagery. So this is setting us up for Babylon in the end. Babylon's not gone anywhere, it's still here today. We need to be aware of where Babylon is. The Roman Catholic Church, this music industry, this multi-faith agenda is all setting the stage for Mystery Babylon the Great, the ultimate city where this will be based and will infect all these other kingdoms. It's very interesting. The music industry is one of the biggest money-making industries in the world. So this is what we've got to learn. My children, keep yourselves from idols. You kind of think, well, yes, we'll keep ourselves from idols. You become like the thing you serve. This is how this affects us. They have idols of musicians, and they have idols of movie stars. We've got to be so careful that we don't make idols out of preachers. That we have people we respect and look up to and listen to their teaching, and as much as we see Christ in them, and as much as they tell the truth, we take that on board. But we don't listen uncritically to our preachers, or uncritically look at their lifestyle. Because here's the thing, if we make an idol out of them, we become like them. Now, I'm not saying those preachers are telling people, idolize me, or trying to promote it. Some preachers turn around and say, I'm a loser, don't look at me, look at Jesus. And they're not wanting to do that, but people make idols out of preachers, and then they try and be like them. And then we have a big mess. A big mess. Idolatry always influences the idolater. If the music industry, which musicians do we really idolize? We shouldn't be idolizing any of them. Enjoy your music, but don't take on board the musician or their lifestyle or their... And if the music's affecting you, get rid of the music. If you can't listen to Mozart without thinking Mozart was such an amazing person when he was a debaucherous, good-for-nothing guy, then get rid of your Mozart. It doesn't matter that it's classical music. You become like the thing you serve. This mystery Babylon wants to be goddess and queen, and we need to have no place for her. No place for her. It's going to be hard because everything's going to run according to her. Gold, silver, precious stones, food, industry, everything's going to be Babylon. We've got to be in the world, but not of it. We've got to walk through this world without this world clinging to us. So it's good if not to listen to any music. If it's going to cling, if Babylon's going to cling to me, get rid of the lot. If the film industry is going to rub off on me, and I just I'm amazed at how many people take these film stars, because they say the name Jesus, it's like, wow, do you know what they believe about Jesus? Do they actually follow Jesus, the Jesus of the Bible? But why do we get so caught up? Because he's a movie star. And we're just like the world, and the movie stars are like, wow. They're just people who think they're gods. Some of them think they're gods. Morgan Freeman, he says he's an atheist, but he says, I'm God. I'm a god. That's the acting industry is full of God and gods and goddesses.
Yes.
It finds its basis in gods and goddesses. The shaman takes on the spirit, becomes the god in the space.
Yes.
The actor becomes another person in the space. It's from the same source, the whole theatre thing. And yet, in the Bible, what do we find? Song of Solomon, piece of theatre. God can sanctify something for his use. But let's not take on board the ways and the thinking of the world, because it's all going to Babylon the Great, the end time war. And God will use the Antichrist to judge her. You don't want to be part of her, because if you're part of her, you're going to be judged with her. But if you're not part of her, and you're separate from her, then you'll be spared that which will come. That's why it says, come out of her, my people, and do not partake in her sins, that you do not share in her plagues.